We are here today to demand accountability for the death of Johann Sebastian, a 25-year-old father and work permit holder from Colombia, killed in front of his young daughter by an ICE officer with a history of violence, who was by all accounts was unfit to have a badge and a gun. His death is a direct result of the Trump administration's unlawful, out of control immigration policies. Unfortunately, Johann Sebastian's killing isn't an isolated case. Across our country, immigration officers have hurt and killed Americans and immigrants alike, created chaos in our communities, and violated the law. Despite promising to go after the worst of the worst, ICE is arresting people with no criminal record to fulfill arbitrary, politically motivated quotas, and by making our communities less safe. ICE lowered hiring standards and reduced training have led us to hiring unfit officers and putting them on our streets with catastrophic results. The Department of Homeland Security has lied repeatedly about what happened in these shootings, falsely blaming the victims and then backtracking when video footage contradicts their lies. Rather than reining in ICE, congressional Republicans have refused to conduct oversight of the agency, instead giving ICE billions in taxpayers' dollars with no strings attached. This is absolutely outrageous.
Abolish ICE!
Thank you. In the absence of action by our Republican colleagues, Homeland Security Committee Democrats have held forums and conducted site visits in communities devastated by ICE's immigration policies. We've heard from elected leaders, community members, and grieving families from Houston, New Orleans, New Jersey, Chicago, Minneapolis, and beyond. And now, tragically, we add Biddeford to this list of communities that have suffered a terrible loss. Today, we will hear testimony from family members, elected officials, attorneys, and advocacy groups about what happened. And we will hear about what Congress must do to prevent yet another life being cut short by a rogue ICE agent who decides to shoot first and ask questions later. I pray that congressional Republicans hear the witnesses' testimony and realize they can't sit idly by as innocent people are shot and killed by their own government. Please know that we will do everything possible to hold the Trump administration accountable for what happened here in Biddeford, ensure federal government cooperates fully with the state of Maine's investigation, and prevent future senseless tragedies. We stand united in support of this proud community. We will not look away. We will not stop, and we will not allow these abuses to go unchallenged. Thank you. And now I introduce someone to you who's no stranger. I recognize Rep. Pingree to offer her opening statement.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Thompson, and to my colleagues who are here today. Before I start my opening statement, I just want to give a quick thank you to everyone who has made it possible for us to be here today. I really appreciate all the law enforcement officers in the room and the Biddeford Police Department under Chief Fisk, Superintendent Jeremy Moe, who allowed us to use this space, all the municipal and school employees who have allowed us to be here and set this up, my own team who's worked hard on putting this together, the Democratic Committee staff, and the staff who works for all of my colleagues who have done so much. And I also want to give a thank you to all of the elected officials who are in the room with us today. I know, we can pop in for a minute and go back to Washington, and you are the ones who are here dealing with grieving communities and frightened constituents. I don't have time to introduce all of you, but could you just stand up if you're in any elected legislative municipal office, just so everyone knows how many of you are in the room. Thank you so much for your leadership and for the opportunities I have to work with so many of you. I'm just grateful for all of you and your service. And again, thank you to Ranking Member Thompson, to my other colleagues here today taking time, flying from Mississippi, Louisiana, and Massachusetts. We've got them all. I just want to begin by saying something that's so obvious, but the reason we are here today, Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero should be alive today. He should be at home with his partner. He should be watching his 3-year-old daughter grow up, going to work. He should be part of this diverse and vibrant community. Instead, his life was tragically cut short. Just a little over a mile from where we now sit, a federal immigration enforcement agent shot and killed him as he was leaving for work. I am still so angry that a young man ended up dead on our streets and that his daughter will now grow up without a father. More than 1 month later, there are still so many basic questions about what happened that remained unanswered by ICE and the Trump administration. We are here to examine the circumstances of that tragic morning in July and the enforcement policies that brought armed federal agents into our quiet communities in the first place, and whether ICE has even a basic understanding of the people it's targeting. We know that Johann Sebastian was not the intended target of the operation, and he did not have a final order of removal. He had a pending asylum case and a valid work permit. In just the past few days, we have learned that ICE's intended target, Johann Sebastian's roommate and the owner of the car he was driving that morning, also did not have a final removal order. This shocking revelation in clear contradiction to what ICE and DHS have been saying about the operation raises fundamental questions. How is ICE deciding who to target and detain in Maine? What information are its agents relying on? And is anyone checking whether that information is complete or even correct before armed officers are sent into our communities? As so many of you know, all too personally, we are seeing this happen over and over again. If ICE cannot accurately determine a person's immigration status or circumstance before taking enforcement action, that is a profound failure of competence and accountability that is leading to innocent people, people who are following the law and doing everything asked of them, being caught in ICE's crosshairs. The consequences, as Johann Sebastian's family knows all too painfully, can be deadly. For months, Mainers have been forced to endure an aggressive federal immigration enforcement campaign across our state. We saw it during the disgustingly named Operation Catch of the Day earlier this year. Now, while that surge may have seemed short-lived, ICE operations have not by any means ended here. We are now seeing their threatening presence extended into the Portland Jetport and other places that are supposed to be safe and protected, not to mention they are essential to Maine's communities and our economy. I hear daily from constituents like all of you who are frightened. They're frightened for themselves, their families, their neighbors, and their fellow Mainers. I hear from employers and small business owners who are worried for their employees, who are afraid to leave their homes. Yep. I hear from attorneys who are frustrated by the lack of cooperation from the federal government while they try to represent their clients. and I hear from local officials who do not know what federal agents are doing in their communities or why they are here. If the Trump administration and their DHS is going to send armed immigration officers into Maine, then we deserve to have assurance that every possible safeguard is in place to protect anyone who is caught up in their incompetence. Today we are very fortunate to have Johann Sebastian's parents, Dora and Omar, here. We have advocates who work tirelessly with and for Maine's immigrant communities, and we have elected officials like Biddeford's mayor, who has bravely led a grieving community. I just want to thank you so much for each being here and the work you are doing, particularly for Johann Sebastian's family. And for your... For Dora and Omar, I am so deeply sorry for your loss. I cannot imagine how difficult it must be to sit in this room and relive the consequences surrounding the death of your son. My heart breaks for you and for his loving partner Carolina and their young child at home. I know this hearing cannot bring Johann Sebastian back, but Congress has an obligation to make sure that his death is not dismissed as an unfortunate consequence of immigration enforcement, and that his life is remembered for the humanity and dignity and love that he embodied. Immigration enforcement does not mean feckless free rein. ICE does not have a free pass to endanger the public, and no federal agency should be operating in Maine or anywhere else without accountability to the people it is supposed to serve. Johann Sebastian and his family deserve justice, and the people of Biddeford deserve answers. And the people of Maine deserve to feel safe in their own communities. That's why we're all here today. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, the Democratic Whip, Representative Clark, to offer an opening statement.
Thank you so much to Ranking Member Benny Thompson for convening this critical hearing. And a huge thanks to Congresswoman Pingree for being our host, for being your advocate, and for continuing to seek justice and the truth. We are so very grateful to you. Yes. Is that better? All right. I hope you heard my praise for your Congresswoman. I also want to thank my colleague, Congressman Troy Carter from New Orleans, Louisiana, and Governor Mills, thank you for being here with us. But my most deep gratitude for our witnesses, excuse me, especially Mr. Duran Guerrero's family. We so appreciate you being here in this time of grief and pain and loss. And we appreciate all of you, the community members of Biddeford, and those who traveled here to make sure that we continue to shine a light on the truth of what happened here. And this pain is being felt across the country. Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero was a husband and a father who wanted to give his 3-year-old girl a shot at the American dream. His cold-blooded killing at the hands of a dangerous, out-of-control ICE agent, at the hands of an abuser with a history of violence against his own family, is not only a tragedy for this community, it is a moral stain on our government. This isn't someone that ICE was looking for. This isn't a warrant that they were executing. This wasn't a suspect. Johann Sebastian had not done anything illegal. This was a random stop that quickly escalated into a killing. All with ICE's body cams off, and even ICE knew that this had gone horribly wrong. Even they decided to halt all vehicular stops in the aftermath until Donald Trump reversed that decision, not only 24 hours later. If this can happen to Johann Sebastian, it can happen to anyone. If this can happen here in Biddeford, Maine, this can happen anywhere. ICE is a danger to every community in which they are active if they are not held accountable. We are witnessing state-sanctioned terror inflicted on innocent people by their own government. And we condemn it. House Democrats condemn it. All of us across this country condemn it, except for a specific group. Republicans in the House and in Congress continue to fund, green light, and cover up for this reckless agency. So our job here today, together, is to shine a light on the truth. And the truth is that these are not protectors of our community, of our laws, of our borders. This is a mass secret police force that has terrorized children, trampled on our Constitution, and wielded violence as a political weapon. And the truth is, the American people have had enough. Enough fear, enough terror, enough inaction from Republicans that won't stand up to this injustice. So we thank you again for being here today. I thank the witnesses, not only for being here today, but the work you do across Maine every single day for immigrant communities. And I thank you for speaking out and sharing your stories. I'm so grateful to my colleagues and to the family of Johann Sebastian for this important and urgent discussion. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. I'd like to now invite Representative Pingree to introduce our first panel of witnesses.
We are very fortunate today and very grateful the parents of Johann Sebastian are here with us today. So I would like to introduce Omar Duran Plata to speak for the family, and on behalf of all of us in this room, I hope you see the love and support that we all have for you, and that we are all here to do anything we possibly can for you and your family. After Omar Duran Plata, we will have the good fortune of hearing from our Governor, Janet Mills, who is here today to support the Committee of Biddeford, to talk about her efforts on behalf of our state of Maine to reduce the activities of ICE and let them know they are not welcome in our state. So I thank you both for speaking. We will begin with Omar Duran Plata. Thank you so much to you and your wife for being here today.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Omar Durán, mi esposa Dora Guerrero. Somos los padres de Johann Sebastián Durán Guerrero, quien el 13 de julio de 2026, en un operativo de ICE, por uso excesivo de la fuerza, fue asesinado estando indefenso en el vehículo en el cual salía a trabajar esa mañana.
Good morning. My name is Omar Duran, and my wife is Dora Guerrero. We are the parents of Johann Sebastián Durán Guerrero, who on July 13, 2026, during an ICE operation, was killed as a result of excessive while he was senseless in the vehicle he was using to head to work that morning.
La muerte de nuestro hijo, hermano, padre y esposo nos ha dejado el corazón roto, un gran vacío en nuestras vidas, sintiendo un gran dolor en el alma cuando su pequeña hija, nuestra nieta de 3 años, pregunta por su papá, ¿por qué él no ha llegado del trabajo?
The death of our son, a brother, a father, and a husband has left our hearts broken and a great emptiness in our lives. We feel a deep pain in our souls when his little daughter, our 3-year-old granddaughter, asks for her daddy and why he doesn't come home from work.
Esto es algo muy triste. Su esposa siente esa gran ausencia de mi hijo en su hogar, un hogar que fue formado en el amor, con ilusiones, esfuerzos y sueños por cumplir.
This is very sad. His wife feels his absence deeply in their home, a home they built with love, hopes, hard work, and dreams still to be fulfilled.
Nuestro hijo fue una persona maravillosa, responsable, honesta y amorosa. Estos son los valores que nosotros le enseñamos en nuestra casa. Él siempre se destacó por su gran sonrisa, por tener un corazón grande y bondadoso, por siempre estar dispuesto a ayudar a los demás.
Our son was a wonderful person, responsible, honest, and loving. These are the values we taught him in our home. He was known for his big smile, his big, kind heart, and for always being willing to help others.
Mi hijo siempre se esforzó por darle lo mejor a su pequeña familia, pero también a nosotros como padres y a sus hermanas.
Our son always worked hard to give the best he could to his little family, but also to us as his parents and to his sisters.
Joan Sebastián siempre estuvo pendiente de su mamá, quien padeció cáncer de seno. Mi hijo siempre estuvo ahí, siendo la fuerza y el apoyo para continuar con la vida. A pesar de la distancia, mi hijo siempre estuvo presente con un mensaje o una llamada.
Joan Sebastián always looked out for his mother, who suffered from breast cancer. Our son was always there, giving her the strength and support she needed to keep going. Despite the distance, he was always there for her, with a message or a phone call.
Nuestro sueño siempre fue volvernos a reencontrar y darnos un abrazo. Hoy ese sueño ya no puede realizarse. No sabemos cómo continuar la vida sin ti, hijo. Solo esperamos poder encontrar la fuerza para continuar.
Our dream was always to be reunited and to hold each other again. Today, that dream can no longer come true. We do not know how to go on with life without you, son. We only hope we can find the strength to continue.
La muerte de Joan Sebastián en esas condiciones a manos de ICE nos llena de temor e incertidumbre a la comunidad. Por eso solo le pido a Dios y a la justicia que sea aclarado el caso de mi hijo y de muchos que han tenido que vivir esa situación como esta.
The death of Joan Sebastián under those conditions at the hands of ICE fills our community with fear and uncertainty. That is why I ask only of God and of the justice system that my son's case be brought to light, along with the cases of the many others who have had to go through something like this.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you so much. At the request of the family and their attorney, we will not ask any questions of this panel. Thank you so much.
Now, we're looking forward to hearing from the governor. Thank you very much, Governor Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Duran Plata. Muchas gracias, Senor Duran Plata and Dora, and for your courage and for sharing your testimony. in this congressional field hearing, and my deepest condolences on the part of the state of Maine to you and your family during this difficult time. Mi más sentido pésame. Ranking Member Thompson, Congresswoman Clark, and Congresswoman Pingree, I appreciate your coming to Biddeford to hear directly from this community in the aftermath of this horrific tragedy. The violent death of a young father leaving his home on a quiet street to just go to work, just a short ways from here. Like people across Maine, I am heartbroken. I'm furious. I'm outraged. It's the outrage that most people in this community feel, the outrage that most people in this state feel, the outrage that much of this country feels, as you have represented already in your remarks. Outrage not simply at Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero's death and the suffering of his family, but at the outrage at the callous and unregulated show of force by federal agents in cities across this country that is all too often creating situations that put everybody in danger in neighborhoods across every state. I'm not here to comment on the facts surrounding the tragedy. I do have full confidence in the Office of the Attorney General, led by Attorney General Aaron Frey, that they will complete a thorough investigation into the facts of this tragedy, and that they will report them to the public in due course. I have personally met with Mayor LaFountain, Speaker Fecto, Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero's family as represented by the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, Biddeford Representatives Geer and Mallon, and Biddeford Senator Henry Ingerson. I believe the city of Biddeford is doing everything it can to support this community, a community where 150 years ago, immigrants from Ireland and Canada, and later Greece, Italy, and France came to work to raise their families, and where new Mainers now work and look to find peace and opportunity here in our state. I've directed our Maine Office of New Americans to conduct meetings in communities such as this one, and to hear from those who may feel less safe for obvious reasons because of federal immigration operations that are based on questionable numerical goals and political gamesmanship unrelated to public safety. The people of Maine, like people across this country, do not want to live in fear in their own communities. They do not want to see their loved ones and peace-abiding neighbors struck down by federal agents. They do want to see qualified law enforcement agents cracking down on human trafficking, on labor violations, illegal drug dealing, but they do not want federal agents roaming peaceful neighborhoods and stopping people for non-criminal behavior. Stopping them based on the color of their skin, their accent, their ethnic origin, or their mere status as a foreign-born individual. Look, here in Maine, we know what good law enforcement is. We know what it looks like. We're not against law enforcement. Here, members of law enforcement are held to high professional standards. They undergo substantial professional training, 18 weeks minimum at our renowned Criminal Justice Academy. They are accountable to the law, and I can tell you this, they don't arrest people in order to fill a quota or to respond to a political agenda. And by the way, we are proud that our state boasts of one of the lowest crime rates in the country. And yet, earlier this year, while conducting an enhanced enforcement operation in Maine, ICE agents actually arrested 2 Maine corrections officers, law enforcement, people who themselves are enforcing the law and helping keep us safe. And they targeted a nurse and a civil engineer, among other people who were productive members of our community with no criminal history. The unfairness of that operation and its disruptive influence on the peace of our communities and on the stability of our workforce in construction, transportation, healthcare, food processing, hospitality, and retail sectors of our economy. That's a major reason why the Maine State Chamber of Commerce complained to Congress that ICE's aggressive actions were hurting our economy.
It's true.
They called on Congress to require reform, restraint, and greater professionalism in that agency. At that time, I suggested the following specific reforms with respect to ICE. 1, prohibit agents from wearing masks. 2, require agents to identify themselves by voice and appearance, as our law enforcement do. 3, mandate the wearing of body cameras and preserving the videos. 4, provide much greater professional training. 5, pursue civil and criminal liability for abuses of power. And 6, require valid judicial warrants for arrests,
Yes.
among many other measures.
Yes. Yes.
That did not happen. Congress rejected many meaningful oversight measures. I'm not blaming parties present. And emboldened by Congress's failure to act, and by a Supreme Court ruling that allows the deportation of non-criminals who are merely escaping violence and disaster in war-torn countries. The Trump administration merely escalated ICE's bad tactics.
They're destroying our country.
There are reports now that the Trump administration is trying to equip agents with electric shock gloves.
Ridiculous! Absolutely appalling.
Yet another way to inflict fear and pain, nothing more. And it appears that the administration is now deploying ICE agents at the Portland jetport, just recently detaining a highly valued nurse at Maine Medical Center, and 5 others. Congress must send the clear and unmistakable message that these tactics are not just morally wrong, they also imperil the safety and security of every person who calls this country home.
Yes.
Following the death of Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, I wrote to our delegation to urge Congress not simply to share in our grief or to express concern or condolences, but to hold ICE accountable, to require all federal law enforcement agencies to respect the rule of law, honor our collective security in every way.
Uphold their oath to the Constitution.
Today, I call on Congress to rein in ICE, an objective I know many of you share. Because before more families are robbed of a loved one, this violence has to end. Before one more community is robbed of its peace and security, this has to end.
We do not feel safe.
Before more gunshots shatter another windshield and steal another person's life and fracture the freedom of all who seek peace, this has to end.
Yes.
Before the fragile
Close it
American
down.
dream that was memorialized on hopeful parchment just 2.5 centuries ago, before that is altogether abandoned, this has to end. It has to end. And if ICE cannot be reined in and fundamentally reformed, then it is time to abolish it. people in this community, but people in this state. And I speak on behalf of the 1.4 million people of this state who want to be safe and secure in their neighborhoods. And I want to offer my sincere appreciation for the work of Chellie Pingree, our good Congresswoman. Whose persistence and compassion and intelligent leadership has stood for the truth and actually saved lives.
Yes.
Thank you. Please continue this good work.
Thank you so much, Governor, and to the parents of Johann Sebastian. We will now transition to our third panel of witnesses. Thank our witnesses for joining us today. Our first witness is Mr. Laham LaFountain. I hope Mayor
Liam LaFountain.
Leah
Liam LaFountain.
Liam LaFountain, Mayor of Biddeford. As someone who's a mayor a little younger than you, Mayor, I'm happy to see you. I had a full head of hair when I was a mayor, but time passes on. Mayor has previously served 2 terms on the city council, including a term as council president. The mayor issued a formal proclamation last month demanding justice and accountability following the killing of Johann Sebastian. Our second witness is Mr. Benjamin Gideon, attorney for Johann Sebastian's family. Mr. Gideon holds a degree from Yale Law School and served as a clerk of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. He currently practices at Maine's largest plaintiff law firm. Our third witness is Ms. Sue LaRoche, Executive Director of the Immigrant Legal Advocacy Project. Ms. Roche has been with the organization since 2000, being with that organization and serving as its supervising attorney and legal director prior to her current position. During her tenure, program, staff, and budget have grown threefold. Ms. Roche holds a JD from Northeastern University. Our fourth witness is Ms. Buffalo Chatham, Executive Director of the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition. Ms. Chatham has built one of the most successful immigrant rights coalitions in Maine, representing over 100 member organizations, including immigrant advocacy group and grassroots community organization. Ms. Chatham holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Zambia. Our final witness is Ms. Crystal Crone, founding director of Presente Maine, which works to empower displaced Indigenous and Afro-Latino peoples of Maine. The organization provides holistic support to low-income workers and families to bridge gaps in health care, nutrition, housing, and safety. Welcome to our panel of witnesses. I will now recognize each of the witnesses for an opening statement for 5 minutes, beginning with the mayor.
Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Clark, Representative Carter. Thank you for coming to Biddeford. My name is Liam LaFountain. I have the distinct honor and privilege as serving as the mayor of the city of Biddeford. Exactly 1 week after Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero was killed, I met with Johann's partner, Carolina, and Johann's sister, Daniela, at the corner of Hill and Pool Streets, less than 2 miles from here, where Johann was killed. They showed me a photograph of our city's newest playground, the J. Richard Community Center, where Johann was sitting in a swing with his 3-year-old daughter, Dulce. What struck me was how familiar it looked. A father with his daughter, a family making memories in our city at one of our public parks. And that joy has been taken from them forever. I want Congress to know his name, Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero. He came to Biddeford to build a life. He worked multiple jobs and was raising his daughter here. He was one of us. On July 13th, a federal immigration enforcement operation came into Biddeford and a federal officer shot and killed him. Federal officials have acknowledged that Johann was not the person agents were looking for and that the agents were not wearing body cameras. The next day, after Senator Susan Collins urged the Department of Homeland Security to halt non-urgent vehicle stops, DHS announced a nationwide pause. It lasted less than 24 hours. Now, funding Congress provided for body cameras may instead be spent on electric shock gloves. If Congress cannot hold ICE accountable, who can?
Bullshit.
On July 13th, federal agents left the scene. We remained. That is the part I need Congress and the colleagues on your committee to understand. A federal force came into my city, exercised one of the most extraordinary powers that governments possess, the use of deadly force, and left the consequences for Johann's family and for our city to carry. An arrest can be challenged, a removal order can be reviewed, a death, however, cannot be reversed. Not by Congress, not by a court, not by this committee. That is why the safeguards around deadly force should be the strongest we have. And yet, on the morning of July 13th, in my city, they were the weakest. Biddeford is a city of 23,000 people. We were left to absorb the aftermath of federal law enforcement operation without any federal support. Our police, fire, public works, schools, and community organizations have been stretched ever since. We secured the aftermath of a scene we were not permitted to investigate, responded to misinformation, and protected people's rights to gather, to mourn, to protest peacefully. We stood up mental health, crisis support, and food services, all without additional support. But what happened in Biddeford was not an isolated incident. From 2015 to 2025, at least 9 people were killed in shootings by Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents during vehicle stops. Since March of 2025, federal immigration agents have shot and killed at least 5 people. Johann Duran was the second person killed during a vehicle stop in a single week. And in both cases, the person killed was not the target of the enforcement action. So I ask Congress, what is the threshold? If an American citizens can be killed, if people who are not even the targets of enforcement can be killed, And if that is not enough to stop and examine these tactics and this agency, what is?
Accountability, you guys. Accountability.
I've spent the last month listening to Biddeford residents. They have different views on immigration. But I've heard the same thing again and again. What happened to Johan was wrong, and it should not have happened in our city or in any city across our country. At the same time, a part of my city has retreated entirely from public life.
Yep.
Immigrant residents, including people with legal status and pending asylum cases, are afraid to go about their daily lives. That fear affects public safety across Biddeford. Federal enforcement actions do not end when federal agents leave. Since July 13th, no federal response mechanism has existed to help Biddeford address the fear, the trauma, the misinformation, the vandalism, the strain on local services that followed. The authority was federal, the burden has been local. I know the limits of my office. I understand Congress writes immigration law, and the Biddeford City Council does not. But when the laws you write and the budgets you approve bring federal power into our city, adequate safeguards and accountability must come with it. So I ask Congress, for 3 things. First, justice for Johan and his family. When I met with Carolina a week after Johan's death, she asked me to bring that request directly to you. Justice for the life that was taken, for the family left behind, and for those responsible to be held accountable.
Yes.
Second,
Yes.
give us the truth about what happened on July 13th. Tell us who fired those shots, how that agent was vetted, trained, and supervised, and what standards governed the operation. And give Maine law enforcement everything they need to conduct a full and independent investigation. And third, require of federal agents what we require of our own local law enforcement. Humane treatment, body cameras, visible identification, clear use of force standards, no masks, and public accountability when any force is used. If our police department, operating on less than $10 million a year, can meet those standards, then the standards for immigration and customs enforcement with a multi-billion-dollar budget cannot be any lower. Congress cannot continue expanding the power without strengthening what restrains it. Because the conditions that produced what happened on July 13th still exist today in my city and in yours.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for not just your thoughtful testimony, but clearly it resonates with the committee, and I'm certain your recommendations and other things will become part of the public record of recommendations. We'll now hear from Mr. Gideon. Now recognize Ms. Roche for 5 minutes. Coming back to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Pingree, Representative Clark, Representative Carter. My name is Sue Roche, and I'm the Executive Director of the Immigrant Legal Advocacy Project, or ILAP. ILAP is Maine's only statewide immigration legal services organization. For more than 30 years, we have ensured that Maine people can access immigration legal help no matter how much money they have in their pocket. Johann Sebastian's death is a devastating tragedy felt by his family, the Biddeford community, and all of Maine. It was not an isolated incident, and it was not an accident. It was the direct and foreseeable result of deliberate federal policy choices rooted in racism and dehumanization. As the only organization of our kind in the state, with decades of experience, ILEP has been able to uniquely document ICE and Border Patrol activity and the unprecedented patterns of immigration enforcement that have been happening in Maine since early 2025. I have personally been with ILAP for 26 years, joining as its first staff attorney in 2000, and I have never seen anything like this. In 2025, enforcement patterns included high levels of collaboration between ICE, Border Patrol, and Maine's law enforcement. This typically involved Maine state and local law enforcement calling immigration officers to minor or pretextual traffic stops where they would arrest Maine residents and workers. We also documented incidents where immigration officers arrested people who had been in car accidents and people who had called 911 for help. None of this made Maine safe. It left community members living in terror while draining our state's limited resources. Shame! In January of 2026, ICE descended in Maine in an operation they grotesquely called Catch of the Day, comparing the people of Maine to fish they could catch in a net. In a few days, hundreds of people were ripped from their families, communities, and Maine's workforce. ILAP responded to more than 70 requests for emergency legal help during that time period. We documented rampant racial profiling, ICE smashing windows, snatching people from their cars, grabbing them off sidewalks, stalking schools and grocery stores, arresting people at gunpoint, and other terrorizing and brutal behavior. ICE's violent tactics, let alone the use of deadly force, are unacceptable regardless of a person's immigration status. No one should lose their life or have their family member killed because they're an immigrant. That being said, ILAP has observed that the majority of Maine residents and workers who have been taken by ICE and Border Patrol since 2025 were in lawful immigration processes with no criminal background. This was the case with Johann Sebastian. He was a young father on his way to work. He was following a lawful process under U.S. law. We have reviewed his documents and provided by his family and have confirmed that he had a pending asylum application. He was authorized to work in this country. He was following all the rules and going about a normal day when he was suddenly and viciously killed by ICE. Since the January operation, there have been ongoing high levels of ICE activity in Maine with a particular targeting of asylum seekers. ILAP is responding to arrests every day. So far this year, we have received approximately 350 requests for help through our detention project. ILAP's clients are not only afraid of being detained and deported, they're also afraid to send their children to school, to attend medical appointments, to seek higher education, to apply for new jobs, report crimes, or serve as witnesses. Everyone in Maine is harmed, and our state's entire future is dimmed when so many members of our community are living in fear and are unable to participate in public life. While we look to Johann Sebastian's family to tell us what some measure of justice looks like to them, some things are clear. First, the administration's mass deportation agenda has no legitimate public policy purpose. It harms all of us. Second, ICE is an imminent public safety threat and must get out of our communities now. The billions of dollars that have appropriated immigration enforcement are wholly unjustifiable. Congress should take all steps to defund and dismantle ICE and put those taxpayer dollars towards the public good. A just and humane immigration system is possible. Millions were left vulnerable to this extremist administration, and Congress must not delay anymore in creating a pathway to citizenship for all who call the United States home. Thank you for your crucial oversight work to hold ICE accountable for killing our beloved community member, Johann Sebastian. I look forward to your questions, and ILAP is here to be a resource in the work ahead. Thank you.
I will now hear from Mr. Giddy.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson, Congresswoman Pingree, and all of the members of the committee And thank you for holding this important hearing and for inviting us to testify. Thank you all for coming and supporting this really critical issue and for supporting the family. Before I begin, I just want to reflect on the courage that it took Dora and Omar to travel here after the killing of their son by federal agents in this country, to come here from Colombia to be with the family and you know, that's a fitting contrast. That courage is a nice contrast to the complete lack of courage, weakness, preying on victims and the most vulnerable that we see of the agents of our federal government who are carrying weapons on the public streets. So thank you. It's clear to me from what I've learned about your son that your example of the courage and strength of character that you've demonstrated were taught to him and helped him become the man that he was. So I think you can at least be happy that you raised a very fine, young, and wonderful man. Now, as it was indicated, my name's Ben Gideon. I'm the lawyer that's been charged with the responsibility to represent the Duran Guerrero family and to seek accountability and justice for them for what happened. And I can assure you that we will do exactly that. Now, I grew up in the state of Maine. I practiced law here for more than 20 years. And I've never felt as sad or angry about any case or anything as I do about this case today. It literally makes me sick to my stomach that I have to be here and do this. It makes me so sad that an innocent 25-year-old young man with a beautiful partner, a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, with his whole life ahead of him, was killed for no reason. And it makes me angry, blood-boiling angry, that he was killed by an intentional act of our federal government. It's a hard thing to square the concept of what America is or should be with the idea that our government is now killing innocent people on our streets. Yes. It would be one thing if this was just a single, unintentional, random act of violence committed by a single rogue agent. But this wasn't unintentional. It wasn't random. And responsibility for it is not limited to a single agent. That's right. Instead, what happened in Biddeford, Maine in the early morning hours of July 13 was the result of intentional policies and decisions made at the highest levels of our government to treat the killing of innocent people as acceptable collateral damage to a political agenda. We know it's not unintended or random because it keeps happening over and over again in Minnesota, in Houston, and now in Biddeford, Maine. We know it's not intended or random because there's no remorse, no apology, not even the slightest concern for those whose lives have been destroyed. And we know it's not unintended or random because there's been no effort to investigate the causes of what happened or to change anything or to stop it from happening again.
State-sanctioned murder! Yeah, shameful!
It's been more than a month, 35 days, since Johann Sebastian was gunned down in his car on the way to work. The day after the shooting, Congresswoman Pingree and Maine's entire congressional delegation demanded an investigation. Yet to date, The Justice Department has done nothing to investigate. The FBI has done nothing to investigate. The Department of Homeland Security has done nothing to investigate. We have not heard from any of those agencies, not even once. That is unprecedented in this country. And it's terrible. But what's even worse is that instead of honestly seeking answers, our federal government blames the victim, hides and covers up information, and disseminates lies. Sadly, this has become the familiar playbook. To date, media reports that federal agents have shot and killed at least 11 people in the last year, including 4 shot and killed in motor vehicles like Johann Sebastian. They've shot more than 40 people. Each time, they attempt to justify the shooting based on claims about the conduct of the person behind the wheel. And each time, when evidence has emerged by video, the government's account proves false. Yet the government continues to put agents out on the streets without functioning body cameras to record their actions. It continues to justify killings, making claims about the victim, as it has tried to do here, without a single shred of evidence to support any of those claims. It's not enough that this government has needlessly taken this young father's life. Now it wants to destroy his reputation. They label him an illegal alien to dehumanize him, even though he was in this country lawfully and seeking and following all of the rules. Before he was shot and killed, nobody ever accused Johann Sebastian of doing anything wrong. No one ever accused him of committing any crime or violating any rule of the immigration process. Perhaps that's why, after they shot and killed him, the government had to admit that he wasn't even the target of their operations that morning. The government has stated that the target was someone else with a final order of removal. But now, as Congresswoman Pingree pointed out in her opening statement, the person whose vehicle to whom it was registered also had no final order of removal. So there was no lawful justification for stopping the car in the first place. And it's been more than a month since the killing, and the federal government has yet to tell us who was the lawful target of their operations that morning. I want to pause just for a moment to reflect on that. Our federal government shot and killed an innocent person. It was forced to admit that the person they shot and killed was not the target of their operation. And a month later, the government has still refused to tell us who the target of the operation actually was, or whether there was even any legitimate purpose of the operation at all that morning. The government has attempted to conceal the identity of the shooter. It refused to tell us to date when he was hired. Even to date, they haven't confirmed that he was employed by DHS or ICE. It never disclosed any of the problematic features of his past. What we know about the shooter's identity today, we know not because our government disclosed that information, but only from media reports. It's only through the media that we know about this agent's past. And what we've learned is shocking. We've learned that the agent who allegedly shot and killed Johann Sebastian had a long history of erratic behavior and violence, including threatening to kill one of his ex-wives and throwing boiling hot water on her while she was holding their 3-year-old daughter. We learned that he suffered from mental illness, that he made racist remarks, that he lied on his employment applications and was denied a job with a small-town Maine police department.
That's what I want.
This is the individual that our government handed a gun and a badge to and put out on our streets to enforce our immigration laws. And they rushed him through without proper training. So, recognizing that your Republican colleagues wouldn't come here today, which is sad, But I would hope that even in today's polarized climate, we can all agree that this individual was unfit to wield a deadly weapon under the authority of the federal government. I hope we can all agree that his existence in that role reflects a complete breakdown of any reasonable screening, hiring, or training process. I hope we can all agree that this goes beyond the conduct of one individual rogue agent to implicate those responsible for screening, hiring, training, and supervising this individual. And I hope we can all agree that any semblance of public trust going forward requires that changes be made so that nothing like this ever happens again. Now, the recent track record of our government and this agency give us no confidence that there will be any accountability or corrective action taken. This is why your oversight on this committee is so critical. With the participation of your colleagues, or if they refuse after a leadership change following the next election, Ranking Member Thompson becomes Chair Thompson, and that's coming right up, that this committee has the power to exercise oversight necessary to ensure accountability and reform. So on behalf of Johann Sebastian's family, we ask this committee to begin immediately to fulfill the critical oversight function. Specifically, we are calling on this committee to subpoena witnesses and documents to investigate the following specific issues. First, we ask that the committee determine what policies or practices of the agency allowed the agent who shot and killed Johann Sebastian to have been deemed fit to serve and hired in that position. Second, we ask that the committee identifies those responsible for hiring this agent and demand that they be held accountable. And third, we ask that the committee investigate what is behind the pattern of agents unlawfully shooting into motor vehicles and demand that this practice stop immediately before any other innocent person is killed. On behalf of Carolina, the entire Duran Guerrero family, thank you for holding this important hearing today.
If the future is as you hope it to be, I promise you it will be done. I now recognize Ms. Cheatham for 5 minutes of an opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Pingree, Representative Clark, Representative Carter, and members of Congress. My name is Mufalo Chitam, and I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Legal Rights Coalition, a statewide coalition of over 90 organizations. For more than 25 years, Merck has built relationships with immigrants across Maine. These relationships make us in so many ways the eyes and ears of the community. To understand what we're hearing today, you must first understand Maine. People come for our mountains, our coasts, and our small town. But people stay for something deeper. Community. For immigrant families, this is part of what makes Maine home. And on July 13th, something about that sense of home was shattered. Before Johann Sebastian Guerrero was killed in Biddeford, people feared what an encounter with ICE could mean. After July 13th, their reality became all too clear. An encounter could mean you may never return home. A father left for an ordinary day and did not come home. Across Maine, families saw themselves in that story. They've seen masked agents shatter window cars, vehicles abandoned on the roadside, sometimes still running. They've watched as parents grappled on how to get their children to and from school safely. And on that fateful day, we all collectively shared in the fear that a mistaken identity could result in our death. This is what rushed training, no standards, no accountability, enforcement looks like in Maine. And then there was an empty chair at the dinner table left behind. This is what immigration enforcement looks like from the community side. We tell immigrants, follow the rules, go to work, attend your appointments, make every deadline. Wait while your case moves through a system that can take years. Then we ask them to live normally, even though the beginning and end of their day can become two completely different worlds. Some people calculate risk ordinarily. Is it safe to go to work? Can I safely take my kids to work, to school? What happens if I miss that doctor's appointment or that blood test again? Merck hears that fear through our immigrant defense hotline. When enforcement happens, the hotline rings. The week of Johan's death, it rang 128 times. People called asking, was that ICE? Is it safe to leave my home? What happens to my children if something happens to me? What began as a trusted information sharing has become a statewide network of referrals, legal connections, housing assistance, and community response. The arrest may take minutes, but the disruption takes months. ICE on data tells another part of that story. Merck's analysis has found that 79% of people apprehended in Maine in 2024 and 2025 had no criminal conviction. Yet, this expansion of enforcement has been justified in the name of public safety. The government's own data tells us what we're witnessing in Maine is mission drift. Johan's death cannot simply be dismissed as one officer's isolated failure. Reports that ICE is investing $20 million of electrified gloves underscores the urgent need for immediate congressional action to further prevent predictable harm. The culture of impunity and the normalization of violence and death must be addressed. There should be no tolerance for lack of accountability or meaningful guardrails when federal officials demonstrate a clear pattern of violating the law.
No tolerance.
Congress should end the unchecked expansion of ICE, stop broad community enforcement operations like those we're seeing in Maine, and reconsider which functions should continue, if at all. The billions committed to expanding detention enforcement should instead help to build a functional immigration system. With enough judges, officers, legal capacity, and resources to decide cases fairly and on time. A system where following the process actually means something. drifted from its stated mission, Congress should not reward it with more money and more power. Maine will keep doing what Maine does. We will answer the hotline. We will cover shifts. We will check on each other's neighbor. But a resilient and connected community cannot clean up the consequences of a broken federal policy. Johan should have come home on July 13th. Thank you for bringing the oversight to Maine. Merck stands ready to continue bringing to Congress what we see and hear as you pursue accountability and change. Thank you.
Ms. Chellie, for your powerful words. I now recognize Ms. Crone for statements for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Ranking Member Thompson, Representative Pingree, Representative Clark, and Representative Carter. My name is Crystal Cron, and I'm a mother, daughter, sister, and lifelong resident of Maine. I am the founding director of Presente Maine, a grassroots organization by and for the Latina peoples of Maine. Presente works to bridge gaps in healthcare, nutrition, housing, safety, and other basic needs, while also advocating for safer, more equitable policies and practices to meet the needs of all Maine people. I want to begin today by reminding us that Johann Sebastian's death was preventable. Every death in the hands of ICE is preventable. The question before us is, do we have the courage and political will to protect and defend the lives of everyone in our communities? To say we are heartbroken does not convey the depth of exhaustion, terror, or grief we have felt since July 13th. Over the last month, our team has had the privilege of mourning and learning alongside Johann's family. I learned that Johann was loving and hardworking. He often worked 6 or 7 days a week, from sunrise to when his child was in bed. He came to this country with a dream to live a dignified life with his family. His murder was a final act of violence in a life lived under oppressive conditions designed to strip him of his dignity and steal his humanity. Workers across Maine see themselves in Johann. For years, Presente has worked alongside seafood, agricultural, hospitality, and construction workers who are central to Maine's economy. These industries flourish because of migrant labor, while migrant workers are too often underpaid, exploited, and forced to work extraordinary hours. Thousands of people labor to sustain the economy we celebrate as the pride and joy of Maine, while living under the constant threat of detention, deportation, and death. In processing plants just one town over from where we sit today, migrants shuck and pack lobster meat piecemeal at 40 cents a pound, while that same lobster goes to market for $60 a pound. While beautiful beaches and parks surround us, immigrant families have limited time for rest and recreation. We live under an economic and carceral system that deems some lives more valuable than others. This violence did not emerge overnight. It has been built over decades through policing, detention, and deportation systems that deprive people of their freedom, isolate them from their communities, and hold them in subhuman conditions. Over the last year, families have feared going to the grocery store, dropping off kids at school, and seeking medical care because immigration enforcement has made ordinary life dangerous. In January, we received a tip that ICE was coming to Maine in unprecedented numbers. We watched what was happening in Chicago and Minneapolis, we knew horror was coming. So we did what we were practiced in. We told our community to shelter in place. Since 2020, we have built systems to help our neighbors survive crises. We grow and deliver culturally appropriate food, we support people with rent, we provide accompaniment and transportation to critical medical appointments. We do the work of keeping one another alive. On January 21st, we received the first report that multiple agents were circling a family home in a residential neighborhood in Portland. Over the next several days, hundreds of immigration police tore through our neighborhoods, abducting parents like Joanne. Agents claimed they were targeting criminals. Instead, they indiscriminately snatched people off the streets, profiling them based on appearance alone. Many who were abducted, like Joanne, were not immigration targets. Agents pulled guns on nonviolent observers practicing their First Amendment rights, followed people home who documented ICE activity, and intimidated our neighbors. Advocates warned that it was a matter of time before ICE murdered someone in our streets. David Roulette's murder of Joan Sebastian Duran Guerrero could and should have been prevented. Roulette must be held accountable, but accountability for one person cannot allow us to ignore the violence and dehumanization inherent to ICE's policing and detention system. Joan's death is not an isolated tragedy. It is part of a system that has inflicted fear, separation, detention, and death on immigrant communities. The responsibility for his death and the many deaths by the immigration police and in ICE detention this year is a collective one. Maine people have been clear about what is needed. ICE out of Maine, ICE out from everywhere. The abolishment of ICE and all immigration policing is one of many steps towards repair. It is not the last. Today, Presidente is calling on Congress to pass Congresswoman Ramirez and Congresswoman Clark's Melt ICE Act to end DHS's funding to detain and monitor immigrants and to reinvest those funds into services that support life. We ask you to mourn and grieve Joan Sebastian's life by abolishing ICE and ending all funding for immigration policing. We will not let this death be reduced to a footnote in this administration's enforcement statistics. There is no freedom until everyone is free. Thank you.